Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're tackling something really practical. How to navigate the, well, often messy world of relationships and, personal growth.
Yeah, and our guide for this is Mel Robbins and her let them theory.
Exactly. You, our listener, actually flagged this because you mentioned you're looking for, straightforward strategies, ways to cut down stress, improve connections with others, but without getting bogged down in really complex psychological stuff.
Right. No dense textbooks today.
So that's basically our mission here.
Absolutely. And our source is Mel Robbins' work. Her own story is kind of interesting, too. She faced some pretty big financial and career problems back in her early 40s.
Yeah, read about that.
And she came up with a 5-second rule, super simple technique, really action-focused, that kind of launched her whole career as a speaker and author.
Right.
But the let them theory, the thing we're focusing on, actually came from something much more mundane, like an everyday family thing.
Okay, so let's get into that. I heard something about a prom.
That's the one, yeah. Mel talks about this pre-prom scene with her son, Oakley. He wanted this taco bar, right? But outside. And it was raining.
Oh, no. Classic parent nightmare fuel.
Totally. She's picturing, ruined new sneakers, soggy tacos, the whole disaster. That protective instinct just kicked right in.
Of course. You just want things to go well for them.
Exactly. And then her daughter, Kendall, just drops this piece of wisdom, super casually, "Mom, let them."
Wow. Simple.
So simple. But Mel said that was it, the light bulb moment. She suddenly saw how much stress, how much frustration she was causing herself by trying to control stuff she couldn't control, like other people's choices or, the weather.
And I bet when she saw it there, she started noticing it everywhere else, too.
Instantly. Like the store being out of bagels. Okay, they're out of bagels. Let them be out of bagels. Oakley stays out a bit late. Okay, let him be. Even small things. Her grandma reading the news out loud really enthusiastically. Instead of getting annoyed, she practiced let her. It was about consciously deciding, okay, I'm not going to try and manage this external thing or this person's actions.
So, okay, the core idea of let them is basically protecting your own headspace, your time, your energy, by letting go of that need to control or judge what other people are thinking you're doing.
That's the heart of it, yeah.
Yeah.
And what we really want to do in this deep dive is pull out the most valuable bits, the stuff you can actually use, like today.
Right, those aha moments.
Exactly, things that can hopefully bring some clarity to your own interactions, make things feel a bit smoother, less frictional,
Okay, but saying let them is easy. What makes us try to control things so much in the first place? Where does that urge come from?
Well, Mel dives into that, and it often comes down to some pretty basic human stuff, right? Feeling hurt, feeling left out, maybe just annoyed or even scared.
Makes sense.
She tells a story about finding out her girlfriends went on a weekend trip without her. You know that feeling, wait, what? Why wasn't I invited? It can really sting.
Oh, absolutely. That FOMO.
Yeah.
But deeper somehow.
Yeah.
Being excluded, yeah.
Totally. And her first reaction was, what did I do wrong? How can I fix this? That sort of internal scramble.
Yeah.
But then she kind of stepped back and realized, wait a minute. Her friends were just living their lives, making plans. It wasn't necessarily about her or a deliberate snub.
Oh, okay.
It was her interpretation, her reaction to it that was causing her own pain.
So let them is kind of like drawing a line, recognizing, okay, this is what I can influence my own response. Yeah. This is what I can't, other people's actions, their feelings.
Precisely. And she makes a really crucial point here. There's a danger with let them. You could use it to feel kind of superior, right? Let them do their silly thing, judgmental.
Yeah, I can see that.
But there's a second part to it that stops that. It's called let me.
Okay, so it's not just about others. It's turning inwards, too.
Exactly. That's the key. Let them helps you kind of detach, get some distance from the emotion, from that urge to control. But then let me is where you turn your focus onto yourself. Okay, what's my response? What are my actions going to be? How do I take care of my well-being here?
Right.
So with the girlfriend's trip example, let them helped her step back from feeling excluded initially. But let me was about looking at her own feelings, her own needs, without automatically blaming her friends for them.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay, that really clarifies it. Taking ownership of your own emotional stuff. So how does this work day to day, when you're just dealing with stress?
Mel uses the airport example, which is brilliant because, let's face it, airports are chaos sometimes.
Tell me about it.
Flight delays, long lines, lost luggage.
Yeah.
It's a pressure cooker of things you absolutely cannot control.
Mhm.
And she explains what happens physiologically, right? How stress triggers your amygdala. That's kind of the brain's alarm system.
Right.
And sometimes that alarm can basically hijack your prefrontal cortex, the part that does the rational thinking and decision making.
So the alarm's blaring and the logical part is offline.
Pretty much. That's when you get those impulsive reactions, the things you regret later. Snapping at someone, making a rash decision, fight or flight over like a canceled flight.
Too familiar.
And Let Me is the tool to interrupt that cycle. It's about consciously pausing. Okay, take a breath. Choose your response intentionally instead of just reacting on impulse. That gives you back a sense of control over yourself, even if the situation is still chaotic.
Right. You can't control the flight, but you control your reaction to the news.
Exactly. She tells this little story about being on a plane, someone coughing near her. Her first thought is annoyance, right? Especially because she needed her voice for work.
Mhm.
But instead of stewing or saying something, she consciously chose, let him cough. Let me put in my headphones, focus on my own comfort, protect my voice. Choosing her response.
Okay, so instead of getting sucked into the external drama you can't change, you use Let Me to ground yourself and pick a better path. How does this apply at work? Careers can be super stressful.
Oh, definitely. Think about feeling like you're being strung along for a promotion. It keeps getting mentioned, but it never actually happens.
Yeah, that's frustrating.
Super frustrating.
Yeah.
The let them part here is recognizing, okay, I can't make my boss give me this promotion. I can't control their decisions or the company's timeline. That's their side of the street. Accepting that can be tough.
Yeah, it can feel powerless, leads to resentment.
It really can. But that's where let me comes in. Instead of just staying stuck, fixated on what you can't control, you shift your focus. Okay, let me see what I can control.
Like what?
Like, let me update my resume. Let me start networking. Let me look for other opportunities where my skills are valued. Let me take control of my career path. Mel really emphasizes this idea that you're never truly trapped. You always have agency, even if it's just the agency to start looking elsewhere.
That's empowering. It's shifting from needing external validation to taking internal action. What about dealing with what other people think? That's a big one for a lot of us.
Oh, it's huge. And Mel is really blunt about it because we all care what others think, at least to some degree, even if we pretend we don't.
Guilty.
Right. The real freedom, she argues, comes from actually allowing people to have their opinions. Just
Let them.
let them think what they think. A lot of the anxiety comes from these underlying fears, doesn't it? What if they think I'm not good enough? What if they get mad at me?
Yeah, those internal narratives getting projected outwards.
Exactly. So the key becomes making decisions based on your values, your priorities, not just trying to manage everyone else's potential reaction. She gives this example, like choosing between a friend's party and visiting grandparents.
Okay.
Maybe going to the party feels like the should. Maybe the friend will be disappointed if you don't go. But if visiting family feels more important to you, then let them be potentially disappointed and let me prioritize what aligns with my values.
So let them have their perspective, but let me act based on what feels right for me.
Now, family. That often feels like a whole different level of complexity, doesn't it? The emotional ties are just deeper. Way deeper. Yeah. Family stuff triggers us differently, more intensely. Mel points out that family members' reactions are often tangled up in their own expectations, their history, their specific role in the family system. Those dynamics run deep.
Oh, yeah. Those established roles and patterns can be incredibly powerful and hard to shift.
For sure. Mel shares a personal story about her own mother being initially, not thrilled about her marrying Chris.
Oh, interesting.
And Mel realized it wasn't really about Chris as a person. It was more tied to her mother's own frame of reference, her fears, her past experiences, maybe fear of Mel moving away or changing the family dynamic.
Ah, okay. So it wasn't personal in the way it felt initially.
Right. So applying let them there means giving your family members the space to have their feelings, their perspectives, even if they seem unreasonable to you, and trying to understand where those feelings might be coming from without feeling like you have to fix them or argue them out of existence.
It's like creating some emotional distance while still holding on to empathy.
Exactly that. And the payoff can be huge in families. Less drama, less reactivity. You focus on managing your behavior, your responses, instead of getting caught up in trying to manage theirs.
That leads to another interesting point. Mel makes the link between adult behavior and what she calls childlike behavior. Can you unpack that a bit?
Yeah, this was a real insight for her, something her therapist pointed out. Basically, many adults haven't fully learned healthy ways to process their emotions. We didn't get taught that stuff, usually.
Hmm.
So when someone's acting out, maybe they shut down, get defensive, lash out in anger, it can be helpful to think, okay, maybe their less mature self, their inner child almost, is kind of running the show in that moment.
That's a really compassionate way to look at it, actually.
It is. It shifts your perspective. Instead of reacting defensively yourself, you can try to respond with a bit more understanding. Let them have their emotional reaction, even if it's messy or difficult, without you needing to jump in and fix it or take it super personally. And then let me be the grounded, mature adult here.
So, let me choose my response, set boundaries if needed, but not get sucked into their emotional storm.
Exactly. It's also about processing your own raw emotions first before reacting, which is a key part of being that mature adult.
Okay. How does this help when we have to make tough decisions, knowing other people might not like them?
Mel uses this really stark example. A groom realizing close to the date that he needs to call off the wedding.
Wow. It's huge.
Massive. And often the right decision for you, the one aligned with your truth, feels incredibly wrong or scary because you anticipate the fallout, the disappointment, the anger from family, friends.
Yeah, that fear of letting people down can be paralyzing.
Totally. So the let them part is acknowledging, yes, people will have feelings about this. They might be upset, confused, angry. You can't control their emotional response. That's theirs. But the let me part is about prioritizing what's fundamentally right for you, aligned with your values and your future, even if it causes temporary pain or discomfort for others. Mel actually quotes her therapist saying that other people having negative emotions about your decisions can be part of their healthy processing. It's not your job to manage their feelings about your life choices.
Okay.
And she talks about learning to tolerate that discomfort yourself, to kind of ride the emotional wave that comes with making those hard but necessary decisions.
Accept the temporary fallout because the decision is right for you long term. Okay. Let's switch gears to something else that plagues us all. Comparison, especially now with social media.
Ugh, the comparison trap. Yes.
Yeah.
Mel tackles this head on, and she makes this really helpful distinction between torture comparison and teacher comparison.
Okay, torture versus teacher. Tell me more.
Torture comparison is when you look at others and focus on stuff that makes you feel bad, maybe things you can't easily change, or just their highlight reel, right? It leads to feeling inadequate, resentful, jealous in a destructive way.
Yeah.
That kind of comparison needs a firm let them have their curated life, their apparent success. Don't let it poison your own well-being.
Like endlessly scrolling Instagram and feeling worse about your own life.
Exactly. It's just torture. It drains you. But teacher comparison is different. That's when you look at someone's success or skills, things that are maybe achievable, and you observe them as a source of inspiration or learning.
Ah, so seeing what's possible.
All right. And that requires a let me get to work attitude. Let me figure out what steps they took. Let me see what I can learn from this. Let me apply that to my own goals.
So it's analyzing instead of just envying.
Precisely. Mel even says jealousy can be like a doorway to your future. It points towards something you desire, an area that needs your attention. But the key is action, putting in the reps, as she says, not just sitting there making excuses or feeling bad.
Yeah.
She uses this example of her friend Molly, who was really jealous of a neighbor's successful online presence. Instead of just being miserable, Molly eventually used that jealousy as fuel. Let me finally launch that website I've been putting off.
Turning envy into motivation. I like that. What about friendships in adulthood? They can be tricky to navigate. Things change.
They really can. Mel calls it the great scattering. You know, after school or uni, everyone goes off on different paths. It's not like childhood where your friends are just there in your class or on your street.
Yeah, that built-in proximity disappears.
Exactly. And she says adult friendships often hinge on three things: proximity, timing, and energy. Who's nearby, who has time, who has the energy to invest. And these things fluctuate constantly.
True. Life gets busy.
So navigating this requires flexibility. It needs a dose of let them. Let them move away, let them get busy with work or kids, let them have periods where they're less available. Don't take it all personally. And then the crucial let me part. Let me be proactive. Let me make the effort to reach out. Let me initiate plans, even if I don't know if they'll happen. Let me understand that the ebb and flow is normal.
So it's less about expecting friendships to stay static and more about actively nurturing them when and how you can.
Yes. And Mel mentions this fascinating study from the University of Kansas. It found it takes something like 74 hours together to go from acquaintance to casual friend, and over 200 hours to become close friends.
Oh, 200 hours. That's a lot.
It really is, especially for busy adults. It just highlights that building real connection takes time and intentional effort, which is why Mel emphasizes going first, being the one to extend the invitation, make the call, put yourself out there.
Take ownership of building connections. Don't just wait for them.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, what about when we want someone else to change? Trying to motivate them. That's often where things get really tangled.
Oh, absolutely. A major source of relationship stress. Mel is super clear here. Trying to force people, pressure them, nag them. It just doesn't work. It backfires. It triggers resistance because people need to feel in control of their own choices.
Right. Nobody likes being told what to do, even if it's supposedly for their own good.
Exactly. Motivation has to come from within them. And she brings in a bit of neuroscience, explaining that our brains are kind of wired to tune out negativity threats, guilt trips, passive aggression, all that sighing and hinting, probably not even registering effectively.
That's sobering, but probably true.
Yeah.
So if pressure's out, what's in? How do you influence people positively?
The shift is from judgment and control to compassion and, well, positive influence. That's the let me focus, let me model the behavior I want to see, let me lead by example. Mel talks about mirroring how our behavior can be contagious. If you start acting the way you wish they would, it can subtly influence them far more than nagging ever could.
Walk the walk, basically.
Oh, exactly. And she offers this helpful little framework, the ABC loop. A is apologize and ask if you've been pressuring, say sorry, then ask open questions to understand their view. B is back off and observe, give them space, watch what happens. C is celebrate progress and model change, acknowledge any small positive steps they take, and keep being the example yourself.
Okay, apologize and ask, back off and observe, celebrate, model. It sounds much more respectful.
Okay.
And probably more effective.
Way more effective in the long run. It creates an environment where they might choose to change rather than feeling forced.
Right. Now, shifting to something even heavier, what about when someone you love is really struggling, like facing a major crisis? How does let them apply there? It feels counterintuitive.
It does, because our first instinct is usually to rescue, right? To jump in and fix it for them.
Yeah.
But Mel argues that constantly rescuing someone can actually stop them from learning to cope themselves, from building their own resilience. So let them here means accepting that they are struggling and giving them the space to face their own problems, even if it's painful to watch.
That's really hard, though. Finding the line between helping and hindering.
It's incredibly hard. The key is supporting, not rescuing. Offer practical help. Sure, bring over food, help research therapists, be a listening ear, but don't take over their responsibilities. And if money is involved, Mel is really firm. Set clear conditions. Don't enable destructive behavior.
Right.
She shares this really tough personal story about her own brother refusing to bail out her husband's failing business. It forced them to hit rock bottom, which she says was absolutely necessary for them to eventually turn things around. Sometimes the most loving act is allowing consequences.
Wow. Allowing them to face it, even when it's hard. Okay. How does all this translate into romantic relationships?
A big theme here is avoiding that trap of trying to change yourself for someone or trying to change them into who you want them to be.
Yeah, the if only they would trap.
Exactly. Let them be who they are right now. You either accept that person, flaws and all, or you have honest, loving conversations about your needs and desires, but without the expectation that they must change to fit your mold.
So acceptance or open communication, not secret renovation projects.
Precisely. And the let me part is crucial too. Let me be clear about what I need. Let me understand my own values and deal breakers. And importantly, let me be willing to walk away if the relationship consistently undermines my well-being or core values.
That takes courage.
It does. Mel boils down successful long-term relationships to two key things. One, both people genuinely want it to work and are willing to do the work. And two, there's no fundamental compromise of either person's core dreams or values.
Both wanting it and doing the work and fundamental compatibility.
Yeah. She also touches on Dr. John Gottman's research, the idea that some relationship problems are solvable, but others are perpetual. You learn to manage the perpetual ones, but you can't necessarily solve them. Part of let them is accepting those perpetual differences.
And if the relationship just isn't working, doesn't support your hopes,
then let them go. That's part of let me, honoring yourself too.
Okay. And inevitably, some relationships end. What about heartbreak? How can this help then?
Mel talks about heartbreak simply as a form of grief. It's a loss. So the let me is vital. Let me grieve. Let me feel the pain. Don't rush it. Don't minimize it. Allow yourself that space.
Acknowledge the pain. Don't just try to power through it.
Absolutely. And then as you move through it, the let them comes in. Let them go. Let go of the past relationship, the fantasy of what might have been. Let go of needing them to understand or apologize.
Right. Focus on your healing.
Yeah. And she offers practical steps for the let me part of healing. Let me create distance, unfollow, etc. Let me change my environment like a bedroom makeover. Let me lean on my support system. Let me fill my calendar with things that nourish me. Small, intentional actions focused on yourself.
It's about active grieving and active rebuilding.
Yeah.
And ultimately, it sounds like Mel brings us all back to the relationship with yourself.
That's exactly it. That's
Yeah.
the foundation. Self-respect, self-compassion, honoring your own needs and boundaries. That's where it all starts. Her core message really comes down to let them be them so you can finally let me. Let me be me. The power isn't in trying to control everything and everyone outside of you. The real power lies in how you manage yourself, how you choose to respond to whatever life throws your way.
Okay, so let's recap. We've explored this let them theory as a really practical way to see the difference between what's in our control, our inner world, and what's not, basically everything else, including other people.
Yeah, that core distinction.
And this two-step process, let them and then let me, gives us a kind of framework, doesn't it, for handling stress, work stuff, relationships of all kinds, even how we see ourselves.
It's a tool you can apply to almost anywhere.
The goal being ultimately less overwhelm, less wasted energy trying to control the uncontrollable, and more focus on our own growth, our own well-being.
Exactly. Reclaiming your power by focusing it where it actually makes a difference on yourself.
Right. And on that note, maybe a final thought for you, the listener, to chew on. Think about one area in your life right now, just one, where you feel that pull to control things. Could be a person, a situation, maybe even your own expectations. What might shift just a little if you tried consciously applying let them there? And more importantly, what could you then focus on for yourself with let me?
Yeah, what becomes possible when you shift that energy?
Definitely something to think about. And of course, we encourage you to check out Mel Robbins' work directly if you want to go deeper into these ideas. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive.